I should have seen it coming. Standing in the middle of our luxurious apartment, I watched as my mother's face twisted with anger. Linda wasn't the kind of woman who second-guessed herself. If she believed something, no. If Ethan made her believe something, then it became law. You stole from your own family, she spat, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the marble kitchen counter. I could hear Ethan behind her, arms crossed, a smirk barely concealed on his face. He had played his role well, pretending to be hurt, devastated even, that I had betrayed the family. I didn't take anything, I said, voice steady, even though my heart was hammering in my chest. Oh, please, Ethan scoffed. Just admit it, Emma. Dad's expensive watch, gone. You're the only one desperate enough to steal it. I clenched my fists. This wasn't new. Ethan had been setting me up for years, twisting reality to make himself look like the golden child while I was the family disappointment. It didn't matter that I had good grades. It didn't matter that I had never taken a single cent from them. Mom turned away from me, already convinced. You think I'm going to let you stay here after this? She pointed at the door. Get out. Mom, please, don't call me that. Her voice was cold, final. I turned to my father, James, the only person who had ever fought for me in this house. He looked torn, his jaw tight, as if he wanted to speak, but knew it wouldn't change anything. Linda, don't do this, he tried, but Ethan cut in before he could say more. Dad, don't defend her, he said, his voice full of fake disappointment. She did this to herself. That was it. The final sentence in a trial where I had never even been given a chance to plead my case. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to cry. Fine. I turned on my heels, heading to my room one last time. I shoved whatever I could into my backpack, some clothes, my phone charger, anything I might need for the next few days. My hands trembled as I zipped it up. As I walked back out, Ethan leaned against the wall, grinning. He loved this. He had won. Good luck, loser, he chuckled. I met his gaze, my chest burning with rage. But instead of lashing out, I just smiled. Okay, I said, adjusting my backpack. We'll see. And with that, I walked out the door, leaving behind a family that had never really been mine. The night air felt sharp against my skin as I stepped out of the apartment complex. The weight of my backpack dug into my shoulders, but it was nothing compared to the weight pressing against my chest. I didn't have a plan, no money, no place to go. Well, almost no place. I exhaled and pulled out my phone, my fingers hovering over the screen before finally pressing the call button. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Emma? Hey, Grandpa, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Can I stay with you for a few days? A pause, then a heavy sigh. What did they do this time? I swallowed hard. I'll explain when I get there. Another pause, then, come over, now. The ride to Grandpa Robert's place wasn't long, but it felt like I had left an entirely different world behind. The cold, polished luxury of my mother's home, the pristine marble floors, the carefully curated decorations was nothing like the warmth of Grandpa's small, slightly cluttered house. As soon as I stepped inside, he closed the door behind me, looking me over with narrowed eyes. Did she throw you out? I nodded. He muttered a curse under his breath and shook his head. Knew this was coming. Your mother's always been like this, entitled, selfish. And Ethan? He let out a dry laugh. That boy takes after her too well. I dropped my bag onto the floor and sank onto the couch, exhaustion settling into my bones. I don't even know why I'm surprised. Grandpa sat across from me, his expression softening. You shouldn't be. Your father's always been too damn patient with her. And Ethan, he's never faced a real consequence in his life. He thinks he can get away with anything. He wasn't wrong. Ethan had spent years twisting situations to make me look bad. He never had to try very hard. Our mother always believed him without question. It didn't matter how many times I defended myself. It didn't matter how much proof I had. Mom saw what she wanted to see. I rubbed my temples. I just don't get it. I never took anything. But the moment Ethan pointed a finger at me, she was ready to kick me out without hesitation. Grandpa sighed and leaned back. Because it was never about the watch, Emma. She's been looking for an excuse to get rid of you. The words hit me like a slap. I had suspected it for years, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real. I swallowed past the lump in my throat. Well, she got what she wanted, Grandpa scoffed. Maybe for now. But trust me, Kid Karma doesn't forget. I wanted to believe him. I really did. But at that moment, sitting there with nothing but a backpack to my name, it didn't feel like Karma had any plans of coming to my rescue. 3 days. That's how long I stayed at Grandpa Robert's place, trying to process everything that had happened. 3 days of feeling like my entire world had been ripped out from under me. I wasn't sad, exactly. I wasn't even angry anymore. Just tired. Tired of always being the one blamed. Tired of watching Ethan win. Tired of knowing my mother would never see me as anything more than a burden. Grandpa didn't push me to talk. He never did. Instead, he gave me space, letting me help him with small things around the house, fixing a leaky faucet, organizing his old bookshelves, even cooking dinner together like we used to when I was little. It was a quiet, steady kind of comfort, the kind I had never really gotten at home. But on the third night, something changed. I was sitting at the kitchen table, absent-mindedly stirring the soup we had made, when my phone rang. I frowned. Hardly anyone called me, and the last person I expected to see on the screen was Dad. I hesitated. Grandpa glanced up from his newspaper. "You gonna answer that?" I wasn't sure. I let it ring for another few seconds before finally picking up. "Hello?" There was silence on the other end. Then, a slow breath. "Emma." Dad's voice was quiet but steady. "I need you to come home." I blinked, gripping the phone tighter. "What?" "I'm sending you money for the trip. Get here as soon as you can." Something in his voice was different. He wasn't pleading, wasn't trying to soften the blow like he usually did when Mom and Ethan pulled something. He was firm, certain. "Dad, what's going on?" I asked cautiously. A pause. Then, just 2 words. "Trust me." A second later, my phone buzzed with a text. A transfer notification. Enough for a bus ticket. I stared at it for a long moment, trying to make sense of what was happening. Grandpa set his paper down. "That was James?" The first nodded. He let out a low hum. "Sounds like something's finally snapped." I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. The ride back home felt surreal. I watched the buildings blur past through the bus window, my thoughts racing. Why now? What had changed? When I left, Mom was certain she wanted me gone. Ethan was on top of the world. And Dad, he had stood there, too afraid or maybe too tired to fight back. So why was he suddenly telling me to come home? I wasn't sure what I was expecting when I arrived, but it certainly wasn't this. Dad was waiting for me outside the apartment building. That alone was strange. He wasn't the type to meet people at the door. But it wasn't just that. He looked different, tired, yes, but not in the same defeated way I was used to. No, this was something else. Determined, resolute. The moment I stepped off the bus, he took my bag from me, giving my shoulder a firm squeeze. "Come on, let's go inside." The second I walked through the door, I felt it. The tension, the suffocating, thick silence that only came when something massive had just happened. And then I saw them, sitting stiffly on the couch like they'd just been hit by a truck, were my mother and Ethan. Ethan's usual smugness was gone. He looked pale, his hands gripping his knees tightly. Mom, meanwhile, had her arms crossed, but there was something uneasy in her eyes, like she was trying to hold on to control, but knew it was slipping. I stopped in my tracks. "What's going on?" Dad exhaled, stepping beside me. Then he looked directly at Mom. "It's time." For a moment she didn't react. Then she scoffed, shaking her head. "James, don't be dramatic." "I'm not." His voice was sharp. "You and Ethan need to leave." Silence. Ethan let out a nervous laugh. "What?" Dad didn't even look at him. He was still staring straight at Mom. "I'm done, Linda. Done pretending. Done enabling this. This apartment, it's mine. I paid for it. I pay the bills. And you've done nothing but tear this family apart. Mom's jaw clenched. I'm your wife. Not anymore. He pulled a folder from the counter and tossed it onto the coffee table in front of her. I've already spoken to a lawyer. The divorce is happening. Your credit cards? Canceled. Your access to my accounts? Gone. Ethan shot up from the couch, his voice rising. You can't do this. Dad turned to him, his expression unreadable. Watch me. Mom snatched the papers off the table, flipping through them, her face growing paler with each passing second. I just stood there, trying to process what I was witnessing. Dad had finally had enough. Mom scoffed again, but there was an edge of desperation now. You're going to regret this. No, Linda. The only thing I regret is letting this go on for so long. Her gaze flickered to me, and for the first time in years, she looked unsure, uncertain, because for once, she wasn't the one in control. Ethan, still standing, turned to me next, his lips curled, grasping for some kind of leverage. Emma, say something. I met his eyes, remembering the way he had smirked when I left, remembering the way he laughed and called me a loser. I took a slow breath, then I smiled. Good luck, loser. Ethan's mouth dropped open. Mom shot up from the couch. James, you're making a mistake. Dad simply pulled out his phone and started dialing. I'll call security if you don't walk out on your own. For a moment, they both just stood there, waiting for him to back down. But he didn't. And just like that, they were out of options. Ethan let out a frustrated growl, snatching his jacket off the couch. This is bullshit. Mom was slower to move, still clutching the divorce papers, like they might suddenly disappear. But eventually, she straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and turned on her heels. I watched as they walked to the door, knowing that for the first time in my life, I had won. Dad let out a slow breath and turned to me, something in his eyes softer than I had ever seen before. Welcome home, Emma. The silence that followed was almost eerie. I stood there, staring at the closed door, half expecting Mom and Ethan to storm back in with some last-minute scheme to turn the tables. But they didn't, because for the first time in their lives, they had lost, and I had won. Dad ran a hand through his hair, exhaling like a weight had finally been lifted off his shoulders. Well, he said, breaking the silence, that was long overdue. I let out a breathy laugh, still processing everything. You think they're actually gone for good? He nodded. I made sure of it. The accounts are locked, the lease is in my name, and the lawyer has everything set to finalize the divorce. They have nowhere to go. It was surreal. I had spent years being treated like an outsider, in my own home years of my mother's cold indifference, Ethan's manipulative games, and my father's silence. And now, just like that, it was over. I followed Dad into the kitchen, where he poured himself a glass of water, his movements more relaxed than I had ever seen. Hungry? I blinked at the sudden shift in tone. What? He gestured to the stove. I made pasta earlier. Should still be warm. That was what broke me. Not the eviction, not the divorce papers, not even the look of pure horror on Ethan's face when I threw his own words back at him. No. It was this being home and finally feeling like I belonged. I sat down at the kitchen table as Dad grabbed me a plate. I hadn't realized how much I had been running on adrenaline until I started eating, my appetite catching up with me all at once. Dad sat across from me, sipping his water, watching me carefully. After a moment, he said, I should have done this years ago. I swallowed. What changed? He set his glass down. I think I always knew your mother was difficult, but I told myself it was easier to keep the peace. I thought I was protecting you by staying. I scoffed. Yeah, that worked out great. He winced but didn't argue. I failed you, Emma. I let them push you out of your own home. And when I saw you walk out that door, he shook his head. I realized I was done. I couldn't keep letting them win. I looked at him for a long moment. The man sitting in front of me wasn't the same passive, tired father I had known growing up. He had finally woken up. Better late than never, I supposed. Guess karma caught up to them faster than I thought, I muttered. Dad let out a short laugh. Oh, it's just getting started. For the next few days, there was peace. No screaming fights. No passive-aggressive remarks. No more walking on eggshells around the house. It felt strange at first, almost too easy, but I wasn't about to question it. Then, the calls started. Mom tried first. Dad was drinking his morning coffee when his phone rang. He sighed when he saw the name on the screen but picked up anyway, putting it on speaker. "What do you want, Linda?" Her voice was sharp, but there was something frantic underneath it. "James, we need to talk." "About what?" he asked, completely unimpressed. A pause. Then, reluctantly, "Ethan and I want to come back." I almost choked on my cereal. Dad raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me?" Mom cleared her throat. "We got emotional. We overreacted. I think we can all admit mistakes were made on both sides." I snorted. She actually thought she could spin this. Dad leaned back in his chair. "Where are you staying right now?" More silence. Then, finally, she muttered, "With my sister." Ah, that explained it. Aunt Melanie hated my mother. She had never been shy about it either, and I could only imagine how much she was enjoying watching her older sister crash and burn. Dad shook his head. "Linda, I'm not interested in whatever story you're selling. You and Ethan made your bed, now lie in it." Mom's voice turned sharp. "James, you can't just throw away your family like this." He scoffed. "That's funny, considering you had no problem doing it to Emma." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then, for the first time, she pleaded. "Please, James." Dad didn't even hesitate. "No." And with that, he hung up. Ethan's texts came next. "First guilt-tripping, Emma. This is insane. You're really going to let Dad do this to us?" Then anger. "Oh, I get it. This is payback, huh? You think you're better than me now?" Then desperation. "Emma, please. I have nowhere else to go." I stared at my phone for a long time, before finally turning it off. They had so many chances to do the right thing, and they had thrown them all away. Not my problem anymore. 2 weeks passed. At first, Ethan and Mom tried to act like they didn't care. Ethan posted pictures online, pretending everything was fine. Mom stayed quiet, probably hoping Dad would change his mind. But reality hit fast. Mom had never worked a day in her life. She had always relied on Dad's money. And Ethan? He had never learned how to take care of himself because he had never needed to. They had built their entire lives on the assumption that Dad would always be there to support them. And now, that support was gone. I found out through Aunt Melanie that they were completely falling apart. Mom had no savings, no job, and no backup plan. Ethan couldn't even afford rent, let alone keep up his fake influencer lifestyle. And then one night it finally happened. There was a knock at the door. Dad and I exchanged a look before he sighed, got up, and opened it. There, standing in the hallway, was Ethan. He looked awful. His normally perfect hair was a mess, his expensive clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. For the first time in his life, he looked small. "Dad," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I screwed up. Dad didn't react, just crossed his arms. "Yeah, you did." Ethan swallowed. I need help. I have nowhere to go." I waited for Dad to crack, for him to soften, to let Ethan back in like he always did. But he didn't. Instead, he stepped back. "Good luck, Ethan." And then he closed the door. I let out a slow breath, leaning against the counter. For years, Ethan had looked down on me, had made me feel like I was nothing. But now he knew exactly how it felt. For the first time in my life, there was peace. No more constant tension in the air. No more walking on eggshells around the house, waiting for the next insult, the next cruel jab, the next carefully orchestrated attack from Ethan. Just peace. Dad and I settled into a new rhythm surprisingly fast. He still worked long hours, but when he came home, he was present in a way he had never been before. We actually talked. We ate dinner together without arguments erupting across the table. It was normal, something I had never realized I was missing. But Ethan and Mom, they were learning the hard way what it felt like to be outsiders. The first real sign of their downfall came a few days after Ethan showed up at our door. Mom tried calling again. Dad didn't pick up, so she left a voicemail. I sat across from him at the kitchen table as he pressed play. James, I don't know what you think you're proving with all this, but enough is enough, she started. Her voice clipped but controlled. You're going to throw away years of marriage over this. Over her? I raised an eyebrow. Over me? Dad didn't react. Just let the message play. We had an arrangement, Mom continued. I took care of the home. I raised our children. I scoffed at that. She raised Ethan. I just happened to exist in the same house. Dad didn't even blink, and now you're just going to abandon us? A pause, then a slight waver in her voice. James, I don't have anywhere to go. Ethan doesn't either. There it was, the desperation. I know you're upset, she said, trying to sound composed, but this isn't the answer. Just let us come back, and we can figure something out. Please. Silence. Then the voicemail ended. Dad took a sip of his coffee, unfazed. She's panicking. She's realizing she has no backup plan, I said. She never did. He leaned back in his chair. She assumed I'd always be there. I hesitated. Are you going to call her back? He sighed, rubbing his jaw. No. And that was the end of that. For a while, things were quiet. No more calls. No more messages. It was almost easy to forget they existed. Then, one night, Dad's phone rang again. He sighed when he saw the name but answered anyway, putting it on speaker. What do you want, Linda? Her voice was different this time, lower, quieter. But there was something else underneath it. Resentment. It was Ethan, she said through clenched teeth. I frowned. What? Dad leaned forward slightly. Linda, what are you talking about? She exhaled sharply. The watch. The one I kicked Emma out over. The one Ethan swore she stole. A pause. I felt my heart beat slow. Dad's expression darkened. Go on. Mom let out a bitter laugh. He sold it. Months ago. I gripped the edge of the table. I had been telling the truth the entire time, and she had never even considered believing me. Dad inhaled slowly. How do you know? I found the receipts, she muttered. He pawned it and spent the money on God knows what. Ethan had ruined my life over a lie. And now, the truth was out, but only because it had finally come back to bite him. I should have been furious. I should have been screaming, demanding an apology, demanding something. But instead, I just felt done. Dad was silent for a long time. Then, his voice came out eerily calm. Where is he now? Another pause. Then Mom muttered. I kicked him out. I blinked. Wait, what? He was using me, she admitted, her voice bitter. I took him in, I helped him, and he lied to me. Again and again. He stole from me too. A deep breath. I finally had enough. The irony was almost too much to process. Dad exhaled slowly. So what? You expect me to take him in now? Silence. That was exactly what she was expecting. I could almost hear her grinding her teeth. James, he's our son. Dad's tone was firm. He made his choices. You made yours too, she snapped. You picked her. And there it was again. That deep-seated resentment she had always carried toward me, disguised as something else. Dad didn't react. He didn't even flinch. Yes, he said simply, and I'd pick her again. Every time. Mom inhaled sharply, caught off guard by how easy the answer had been for him. Then, for the first time in her life, she lost, because there was nothing left to say. A second later, she hung up. Dad set the phone down and ran a hand through his hair. Well, he muttered, that was satisfying. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. I can't believe it. Believe it. He gave me a small smile. It's over, Emma. We're free. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at my hands, my brain still catching up with reality. It was over. For real. This time. Ethan never tried to contact me. I had a feeling he was too humiliated, too bitter to admit he had lost everything. But I knew the truth. I heard from Aunt Melanie that he was couch hopping with old high school friends, burning through whatever money he had left. Mom, she was still struggling, still scrambling to find a way to maintain the life she had built off my father's back. And Dad? Dad was thriving. The divorce was finalized a few months later. Mom got nothing. Turns out, when you contribute nothing to a marriage, you're entitled to exactly that in the settlement. Meanwhile, Dad kept the apartment, the money, and most importantly, his freedom. And me? I won. Not just in some petty, surface-level way. I truly won. Because for the first time in years, I was happy. I wasn't weighed down by the endless cycle of manipulation and cruelty. I wasn't the family punching bag anymore. I wasn't a loser. I was free. One afternoon, Dad and I sat on the balcony, watching the sun set over the city. He sipped his coffee, looking more at peace than I had ever seen him. "You ever think they'll come back?" I asked. He shrugged. "Maybe. But that's not our problem anymore." I nodded, leaning back in my chair. He was right. It wasn't our problem anymore. It never would be again. Story 2. I never expected my own mother to throw me away like some unwanted burden. But I guess, looking back, the signs had always been there. She had me young, barely 20, and my biological father, he never even stuck around long enough to see me born. According to her, he never wanted kids, and when she gave him the option to leave, he bolted without hesitation. She always said their breakup was bitter, and in the end, she chose not to take child support, claiming she didn't need anything from a man who wanted nothing to do with us. Thankfully, my grandparents were the ones who truly stepped up. They helped her finish school, get a job, and keep a roof over our heads. For the longest time, I thought she was my biggest supporter, my constant in a life where everything else felt uncertain. But things started shifting when she met Harry. I was 8 when he came into our lives. She had dated before, but this was different. They were serious. I remember feeling a little nervous at first, but Harry wasn't terrible. We weren't close, but we coexisted well enough. He didn't try to play dad, and I wasn't the rebellious kid trying to push him away. Everything was fine until the twins came along. Mom and Harry had been married for about 4 years when she got pregnant. Everyone was thrilled, including me. I thought we'd finally feel like a real family, like I wouldn't just be the kid from her past life anymore. But the moment those babies arrived, it was like a switch flipped. She started pulling away. At first, it was subtle, less time for me, more for them. Then it became obvious. She'd snap at me for little things, act like my presence annoyed her. I told myself it was just stress, that things would go back to normal once she settled into being a mother of 3. I even tried giving her space, hoping it would help. It didn't. One day, when the twins were about 6 months old, Mom and Harry sat me down for a serious conversation. I was 16, legally still a minor, but they spoke to me like I was some distant relative overstaying their welcome. "We need to talk about the future," Harry started. Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. "Things are tight right now. We have 2 infants to care for, and we just don't have the resources to support everyone." I stared at them, confused. "What are you saying?" She hesitated, then said it outright. "We think it would be best if you moved out." I felt like the floor had been ripped from under me. "You're kicking me out?" She shook her head quickly, like she didn't want to sound like the villain in her own story. No, of course not. We want what's best for you. We don't want you struggling in a crowded house when you could be somewhere better." "Where exactly?" I asked, my voice shaking. They had no answer. I tried to reason with them. I offered to get a part-time job, help out financially if that was really the issue. But Mom just looked at me, expression cold. "It's not just about money. It's about priorities. The twins need us more right now. They deserve this stability." And just like that, I understood. I was expendable. They hadn't even come up with a plan for where I'd go. They were just hoping I'd get the message and leave on my own, so they wouldn't have to deal with the guilt of officially throwing me out. And it worked. I wasn't about to stay somewhere I wasn't wanted. I packed a bag that night and walked out without looking back. The only place I could go was my grandparents' house. They were horrified when they found out what happened, but even then, they couldn't bring themselves to cut my mom off. They adored the twins and wanted to stay in their lives, even if it meant keeping the peace. So, at 16, I had no real home. My grandparents were too old to support me financially, so I got a job balancing school, work, and the crushing weight of being abandoned by my own mother. Mom and Harry still came to visit my grandparents occasionally, always bringing the twins, and every time, they barely acknowledged me. If they did, it was polite, distant, like I was just some family acquaintance, not the kid they raised for 16 years. I told myself it didn't matter, that I'd be fine on my own. But when I left for college, and neither of them even offered to help me move into my dorm or co-sign my student loan, I finally accepted the truth. They had erased me from their lives. Starting college was supposed to be exciting, but for me, it was just another reminder that I had no one in my corner. I was 18 moving into my dorm alone, dragging my bags up the stairs, while I watched other freshmen with their parents' hugs, teary goodbyes, proud smiles. Me? I had no one. Well, except for my uncle. He was the only one willing to co-sign my student loan after Mom and Harry refused. Not because they couldn't know. Their reasoning was the same as before. We have to save for the twins' future. They'll need it more than you. Like my future didn't matter. Like I wasn't even part of their family. I worked through college, juggling classes, and multiple part-time jobs just to make ends meet. There were nights I barely slept, days I skipped meals because groceries had to last the week. But I pushed through, because if there was one thing I learned from being abandoned, it was that no one was coming to save me. I graduated without a single word from my mother. No call, no message, nothing. The only people at my graduation were my grandparents. They were so proud, but I could see the sadness in their eyes, like they knew what it meant for me to stand on that stage alone. After graduation, I moved out on my own. The first few years were tough paying off loans, scraping by on an entry-level salary, but I kept climbing. I worked harder than everyone else, took every opportunity, learned everything I could, and eventually it paid off. By the time I hit 30, I had built a career I was proud of. I was in upper management at my company, making more money than I ever thought possible when I was a broke college kid counting coins for ramen. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was comfortable, and I had done it all without the people who were supposed to be my family. Then, out of nowhere, Mom showed up. It had been almost 15 years since she last acted like I existed, and now she was standing on my doorstep with Harry at her side, looking like she expected me to welcome her with open arms. I should have shut the door in her face, but against my better judgment, I let them in. At first, they pretended it was a social visit, small talk, fake smiles. But it didn't take long before they got to the real reason they were there. They had heard about my promotion. My uncle, the same one who helped me with my loan, had mentioned it at a family gathering, not knowing what kind of people they really were. He thought maybe, after all these years, my mother would be happy for me. But she didn't come to congratulate me. She came to ask for money. "We're in a really tough spot," she said, sighing dramatically. "The business we started didn't work out, and with the twins getting ready for college, we could really use your help." I stared at her, waiting for her to realize how insane this was. She wanted me, the child she abandoned, to pay for the education of the kids she replaced me with. I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You do realize I had to pay for my own college, right?" I said, shaking my head. Where was all this concern when I needed help? She flinched, but Harry jumped in. "We thought you understood why we had to prioritize the twins." "Yeah? Well, I had to prioritize myself, and I did just fine without you." They kept pushing, Guilt tripping, saying the first owed them because mom had raised me on her own before she met Harry. That I should want to help my family. That was the last straw. You stopped being my family the second you decided I wasn't worth keeping around, I said coldly. You made your choice. Live with it. Mom's face twisted in anger. I sacrificed so much for you. And this is how you repay me? Sacrificed what? I shot back. The moment you had an excuse to get rid of me, you took it. You didn't even look back. She opened her mouth, probably to argue more, but I was done. Get out of my house. She gasped, like I had slapped her. Harry muttered something under his breath, but they saw it in my face. I wasn't playing. They left, but not before Mom turned at the door and hissed, "You're going to regret this." I shut the door in her face, and for the first time in years I felt truly free. I should have known it wasn't over. Mom wasn't the type to take no for an answer, especially when money was involved. I blocked her number that night, thinking that would be the end of it, but I underestimated just how desperate she had become. It started with emails. At first, they were long-winded sob stories about how hard things had been for her, how she had sacrificed everything to raise me, and how now was my chance to do the right thing by helping the family. I ignored them. Then, the tone changed. The messages got angrier, more bitter. She accused me of being ungrateful, of turning my back on the woman who gave me life. She listed every single thing she had ever done for me, as if keeping me alive for 16 years meant I now owed her a lifetime of financial support. I blocked that email. She made another one. I blocked that too. Then, she showed up at my job. I wasn't even there that day. I had taken a sick day, but my receptionist called me, confused and a little alarmed. "There's a woman here demanding to see you," she said. "She won't leave." I knew instantly who it was. I had them put her on the phone. "Mom, what the hell are you doing?" She started in immediately, voice shaking with fake emotion. "I had no choice. You wouldn't answer me. You're my son, and you're treating me like a stranger. You are a stranger," I cut in. "And if you don't leave my workplace right now, I'll make sure security removes you." That shut her up. I hung up before she could say anything else, then called ahead to let security know she wasn't welcome. I thought that would scare her off. It didn't. A few days later, I came home from work and found her waiting outside my apartment. The second I stepped out of my car, she stormed up to me, eyes wild. "I'm not leaving until you listen to me." I sighed. "I already did. The answer's no." She lost it. She started screaming, accusing me of abandoning my real family, of being selfish, of letting her suffer when I had plenty to give. "You threw me away first," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Now you want my help? You must be out of your mind." Then, out of nowhere, she lunged at me. She tried to slap me, but she forgot one thing. I wasn't a helpless teenager anymore. I was bigger, stronger, and had spent years working out the anger and resentment she left me with. I caught her wrist mid-swing and shoved her back. Not hard, but enough to make it clear I wasn't putting up with her crap. That's when my neighbors came out. One of them, a retired Marine, marched straight over. "Everything okay here?" Mom's face went pale. She looked at him, then at me. I saw the wheels turning in her head, realizing that if she kept this up, things weren't going to end well for her. She turned on the waterworks. "He's my son. He won't even help me." My neighbor just looked at me. "You want me to call the cops?" Mom panicked. "I'm leaving." She stumbled away, got into her beat-up car, and sped off. I knew then that she wasn't done, so I did what I should have done earlier. The next morning, I met with a lawyer and filed a restraining order. 2 days later, I got a call from my grandmother. "Your mom was arrested." I blinked. "What?" Apparently, after I rejected her, she went home and got into a huge fight with Harry. He finally had enough and called the cops when she started throwing things. She got charged with misdemeanor assault. And Harry? He packed up the twins and left town. Just like that, the little perfect family she threw me away for was gone. Did I feel bad? No. Because at the end of the day, she did this to herself. She burned every bridge, destroyed every relationship, and now she was standing in the ruins, alone. My grandparents told me she had been calling them, begging for help. They told her no. They finally saw her for who she really was. And me, I moved on. I finally bought the house I had been saving for. A real home. Not just some place to sleep, but somewhere I belonged. I didn't need her. I never did. And for the first time in my life, I was free.